Hello.
You've seen it in rap videos? Che sanse che bu Setswana. So, qua a Los Angeles che moruta bana, se colo same che Geffen Academy at UCLA, habe che quadile di buket seperi. Di buket same che Behind Happy Faces, Taking Charge of Your Mental Health, a kid's book about anxiety. But che tua halela Botswana tata tata. Qua America hake na dijo sedi monati. Hake na maguinya, hake na seswa, hake na modombe. So kitu mesi tata tata to be in Botswana. All right, Janong, ompieno ketla bua kaha mai kutlo. Ale rata mai kutlo. Yes? Okay. I believe you. Babua boa moruri. So Janon ketla bua sakoa hela. I'll switch now. But kele bohile tata. All right. So it's good to be here. Today we're going to talk about mental health. I think the biggest challenge I have wherever I go in the world and say I'm going to talk to you about mental health is that all of you already have ideas of what those two words mean. Qua America, when I say mental health, people think of like celebrity breakdowns. So they think of like Kanye and they think of Demi Lovato and they think of suicide and they think of people who have problems. But the actual definition of mental health is not having a problem. The actual definition of mental health is how you address problems in your life or challenges in your life. So again, when you think about physical health, you think about exercise and what you eat and how you take care of your body. When you think about mental health, you have to think about how you communicate, what your relationships are like, what your coping mechanisms are. Do you know what coping mechanisms are? What are they? Coping mechanisms can be like talking about your feelings, taking care of yourself, writing, exercising, things like that. But mental health is about taking care of your mind. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So I'm going to talk to you about a bunch of things, mainly to see what you know and how you feel about it. But I'm also going to share my personal story with you. I have a really intense personal story with mental health. I went through a lot of trauma when I was a kid, and then I was diagnosed with depression when I was 16. When I was 17 and in my last year of high school, I actually attempted to take my own life. On the outside, I had the perfect life. I was very popular. I was the president of my class. I played varsity basketball, and I had an outside appearance that everyone thought everything was okay. And inside, I was not okay. So when I talk to you about mental health today, it's not just me coming in as like some Makoa being like, hey, let's talk about feelings. It's something I've lived through. It's something that I know, and it's something that I care about very deeply. But I always like to start by asking you a question. Statistically, around the world, around 20% of students have a mental health disorder, mental health issue. But statistically, around the world, over 60% of students don't seek help. They don't talk about their mental health. So I always like to begin with this question: why? Why is it that all of you know people who experience mental health challenges, but you still have so many people who don't talk about mental health or who don't seek help? So I was hoping some of you could raise your hands. Why don't we talk about mental health? What are the reasons? Yeah. Okay. It's too personal, so it might not be somebody's business or somebody's issue. Okay. What are some other reasons?
Some people would like they would judge you, and you would feel afraid to talk about your feelings
Eh.
with the fear that people would make fun of you. Yeah, so
Yeah.
that's
Yeah. So people could judge you or make fun of you or do other things. Yeah, in the back under the umbrella. That umbrella, Obotlali.
I believe mostly when it comes to boys, it's mostly toxic masculinity.
Okay. That's a very good term. A lot of guys may think then it's what? A sign of weakness. Why don't you suck it up? Why are you crying? Emma Holela, right? Stop crying. Yes. Any other reasons? Why don't we talk about mental health or talk about Mai Kutlo? Anybody else? Okay. One of the biggest reasons I hear is like sometimes you like drag them down with you. You think like everyone's going through something, let me just suck up. Another one is trust. How many of you have someone who has broken your trust in your life? How many of you have had your trust broken? Hey, I don't need to know who did it. You don't need to point them out to me. I don't need to know. So when your trust is broken, it's very difficult to open up and talk about that again. The reason I start with this question and the reason all of your answers are important is because this really is the beginning. People always think like if you have a mental health issue, then you can talk about it or get treatment or help for it. But if you feel any of the things you just said, that it's judgment, that it's personal, that it's a sign of toxic masculinity, that you don't want to burn other people, then it doesn't matter what you have. You have to work past that issue first. So for example, when I was diagnosed with depression, I did have people who loved me. I did have friends. I did have people who cared about me, but I felt stupid and I felt weak and I felt like I should just suck it up. And if I couldn't, that it should just go away on its own. My life didn't change until I worked past those things. So just from the very beginning of this talk, if you really want to make a difference with mental health, you have to start this question. Why don't we talk about it? And then you have to find ways to break down feeling the judgment, the weakness, the shame, the fear, and all those other issues. What you will find a lot of times is when you want people to talk about mental health, they don't have a vocabulary for it. They don't have words. If you think about physical health, you know the difference between having a hurt ankle or a broken leg. All of you know the difference between someone who has a cold and someone who has the flu, although the word flu is used pretty widely in Botswana. Flu can be like, I'm sick. Flu can be like, I don't want to do my homework. Flu can be like, I don't want to go to school today. But there is a difference between having a cold and having a flu. And Waitsi, you know the difference between having diabetes or having cancer. With mental health, we have to do a similar thing. There's a difference between you feeling stress and someone who has an anxiety disorder. So like a lot of times you might feel nervous. You might get like butterflies in your stomach, like a feeling in your stomach where you're nervous. That could happen before you take a test, before you play a sport. You might get butterflies in your stomach when you have a crush on someone, but you don't really know how to talk to them. So you just follow them on social media and hope like a relationship will form. Those feelings are normal. That nervousness is something everybody has. But anxiety is like 100 times that stress. You can tell someone who's nervous to calm down, but somebody who has anxiety actually needs to be able to see reality. So you have different categories for physical health. It's the same thing with mental health. You have everyday things that all of you experience. You have significant events like death, breakups, divorce, things like that that affect your life. Then you have mental health disorders, and then you have disabilities. It's important to keep that in mind because a lot of times you might like not think what you're going through is that serious, but all of it's serious. You just need a vocabulary for it. The other thing that we have to change is like a lot of times when people think of mental health, they think like on one side you have people who are sane and on the other side you have people who have mental health issues, or like a lot of times people use stigmatizing language like wapeka, like they're crazy, right? So when a lot of people think about this spectrum, they think you're sane or you have a problem. But we don't do that for physical health. Like if you think about physical health, none of you ever judge or think differently of somebody who exercises or is eating healthy or doing things. You look at somebody who's taking care of their physical health as being a strong person. So we need to change the way we frame mental health so that when people are taking care of their mental health, talking about it, seeking help, doing things, we celebrate it. And we think that's like a good thing that they're doing, a way to view it. Because when we look at the world like you're either sane or you have a problem, there's not a lot of space for people to change. The other thing I think that's really important for you to know is the second largest period of brain growth in your life is happening now. The largest period of brain growth you have is from ages 0 to 2. The second largest period of brain growth is ages 12 to 25. Young women's brains mature before 25. They typically mature between 22 to 25. Young men's brains mature somewhere between like 25 and like 40. I don't know. It depends on the guy. It's hard to say. It's very difficult. Hotata. Hotata. Hey, no, young men's brains mature somewhere between 25 and 28. The reason young women's brains mature faster is because they enter puberty sooner. I don't know if that's a race anyone wants to win, but they are winning. So, what is happening in your brain right now between 12 and 25 is you are developing patterns and habits for your behavior. So the way you communicate, the way you address emotions, all of you sitting here today, you have an internal voice in your brain. You talk to yourselves. You will talk to yourselves more than you will ever talk to another human being. Now you're asking yourself if that's true. It is true. I'm not inside your brain. That's just the way this works. That voice you use inside your head is the loudest voice you have in your life. What you say to yourself, if you say negative things, hurtful things, harmful things, that's what your brain is maturing into. So what you do now actually really matters. I know a lot of times people look at teenagers and they're like, you're just a teenager. You'll get over it. You'll get through it. But you're actually setting up the patterns for adulthood now. And what you do right now is really important. And that's why mental health isn't something you just try when something's wrong. It's not something you do when you have a problem. It's something you have to build and foster and grow, much like your physical health. And so I'm going to share with you my personal story now. I have a really interesting beginning to my personal story. I live in Los Angeles, like I said. I didn't grow up in Los Angeles. I actually grew up outside of Philadelphia, which is in Pennsylvania. I have a really interesting beginning to my personal story. I was actually born in Bethlehem and raised in Nazareth, Pennsylvania, Jaka Jesu, except Jesu was in Israel. And I was born in Bethlehem and raised in Nazareth, Pennsylvania, which is not Israel, right? So I had a really difficult childhood. 3 of my grandparents were alcoholics. And so my parents were raised in really difficult environments. My dad was raised by a father who never hugged him once, never told him he loved him. My dad never had a birthday party. He never had a friend visit his house. And my dad, his mom, his brother, and his sister were often beaten by my grandfather because he was always drunk. My mom grew up in a home with 2 grandparents who were alcoholics, and a mom who had like a severe anxiety disorder. And so my mom's entire childhood, she was just emotionally and psychologically abused, told she was stupid and useless, compared to her siblings, and always told that she would be nothing. So it's important to think about your family, because none of us are born into this world with a clean slate. So 3 of my grandparents were alcoholics. My parents were raised in abusive homes. When my parents had me and my 2 brothers, they decided that they were going to try and raise us differently. So my dad, who was never hugged once or told he was loved once, decided that he would tell me and my brothers that he loved us every day. And he hugged us every day. And he played sports with us, and he was involved in our lives as much as he could be. My mom decided she was going to do everything she could to never call us useless or stupid or all the names that she was called when she was a kid. But the one thing that my parents could never change is that in our biology, in the genetics of our family, we have mental health disorders. We have addiction, bipolar disorder, depression, and anxiety disorders. So much like all of you inherit your eye color, the shape of your face, your hair, the size of your body, the shape of your body, you can also inherit mental health issues. And that's what happened to my family. When I was 11 years old, I visited my oldest brother in a psychiatric ward, in a psychiatric hospital. And what was confusing about that was that my oldest brother was really smart. He graduated high school when he was 16. He went to an Ivy League university in Philadelphia when he was 16 to major in physics. So he was like really smart. He got through his freshman year, and when he was 18, he had a manic episode where he didn't sleep for like 9 days in a row and ended up in a psychiatric hospital. I visited him when I was 11. And then 2 months after I visited him, my grandmother died. 10 months after that, my best friend was killed in a car accident. And then 2 months after that, my grandfather died. So between the ages of 11 and 12, I went through a lot. But no one ever sat me down and was like, hey, you need to talk about it. Or, hey, here's how you deal with your emotions. I learned to deal with my emotions on my own. What I learned at 11 and 12 was that I was really good at making other people laugh, but I never shared my own feelings. So I went to hospitals and funerals and all those places and did everything I could to make sure everyone else was okay, but I never talked about my own feelings. And then around age 12, I started drinking alcohol. And I didn't drink alcohol every day. I drank probably like 2 to 4 times a month. But I found at age 12 that getting drunk felt better than having all those feelings. The reason it's important to think about when you first start addressing emotions is because it builds patterns in your life. When I turned 16 and was diagnosed with depression, a lot of people thought like that was a very severe thing that I would need to deal with. But 2 very dangerous things happened before that diagnosis. Number 1, I'd been hiding my feelings for 5 years. And number 2, I learned to drink alcohol before I learned how to talk about my feelings. So as I went through my junior year in high school and into my senior year of high school, that's what I kept doing. I kept hiding and I kept drinking. When I went into my senior year of high school, I went into a really deep state of depression. It started off with me just feeling lonely. I felt like there was no one to talk to. No one would understand me. But even if there was somebody to talk to, I thought I should just suck it up. I should deal with it on my own. And if I couldn't deal with it on my own, I thought I must be weak. So I did that. I just sucked it up, didn't say anything to anybody. And then in November of my senior year, in America, school years go from September to June. They don't go from January to December. So in November, September to June. And then you have off from June to September. You have no school. But back to my point. So in November of that year, I started having thoughts of death and thoughts of suicide. And it built to the point where I was thinking about death and suicide 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. But again, I didn't talk about it. For 2 months of my senior year, anytime I was alone, I was crying. Anytime I was in front of people, I would just put on a happy face. I would make everyone laugh. I would make everyone smile. And then I would go home and I would either cry myself to sleep each night or I wouldn't sleep at all because I kept having all these terrible thoughts. I always thought like one day I would wake up and those thoughts would just go away and I would be okay. But unfortunately for me, that day never came. And on January 5th of my senior year, I attempted to take my own life. When that happened, again, I wasn't on like anyone's radar. Like no one knew anything was happening to me. I had a really high GPA. I was the president of my class. I had a lot of things that I was involved in, but none of the outside stuff mattered. Because again, that internal voice you use inside your head was just saying really, really terrible things to me. So I was in a hospital for 2 weeks. When I got out of the hospital and I went back to my school, all of a sudden everything changed. I went from being this cool guy that everyone partied with, that everyone liked, that everyone knew, to all of a sudden people just started calling me a psycho and a crazy kid. I lost a lot of my friends. I got made fun of. I got bullied. And 2 months after I got out of the hospital, out back and was back in school, one of my teachers thought it would be a good idea to have like a psychologist come in and talk about these issues. As the psychologist talked about these issues, every single student in that classroom started laughing. Even my friends that had seen me go to the hospital were laughing. I wasn't laughing. At 17, I was really angry. I was tired of being laughed at. And so I grabbed my teacher and I took him to the hallway and I said, hey, this isn't funny to me. And he looked down at me and he was like, well, what do you want to do about it? And I said, let me speak. If people aren't going to believe what I went through with my mental health, hearing it from other people, maybe they'll believe it if they hear it from me. So I stood up in that exact same high school classroom 2 weeks later and I spoke for the very first time. And when I did that at 17, it didn't go smooth. I shook, I sweated through my clothes, but when I finished my presentation, nobody laughed. When I was your age, I learned that if you share your story, it opens other people to sharing their stories. My life didn't magically get better from there. I graduated high school, I went to college. 2 months into my freshman year, I had a really bad relapse with depression. I had to go home. And then I was in and out of different colleges and different psychiatric hospitals for really the next 4 years, battling extreme substance use issues. I would only drink to the point of passing out. A lot of people that I knew would drink to like have fun. I would only go to parties to drink to just pass out. I hated myself. I didn't really care what happened to me. I didn't care if I died. And so I was abusing myself in that way. When I turned 22, I had drank so much that it got to a point where I realized if I continued it, I was going to die. And if I didn't stop, then there were no other options for me. So at age 22, I decided to really start trying to work on my mental health more. And what I learned in that moment was like, I never chose to have depression. I never chose to have my brother be in the hospital, to have my friend die, to have my grandparents die. I never chose to go through this trauma, but I could choose to change the way that I coped with it. I could stop hiding my feelings and I could stop drinking alcohol. So at age 22, I started talking to my friends more. I started expressing my emotions. I started finding ways to like tell somebody that I was struggling, to trust people. And I started exercising instead of always drinking alcohol, like finding ways to run or lift weights or do other things to get those emotions out. And that was really the biggest turning point in my life. I still have to work on my mental health to this day. And I think one of the hardest things that I learned when I was your age was that when I hated myself, that was the most dangerous place to be in life. Because when I hated myself, I didn't care what happened to me and I didn't care what people did to me. One of the hardest things I had to learn to do was like myself. And only after I learned to like myself could I actually find a way to handle my mental health. Could I find a way to like talk about it, exercise, take care of myself? What I have learned in traveling around the world and speaking to people of all ages is that a lot of people don't like themselves. They look in the mirror, they don't like what they see. They look at their photos, they don't like what they see. They have other people say mean things to them. And if you're sitting here today and you're in that position, one thing you can do is just find like one thing you like about yourself or one thing other people like about you and hold on to that. And if you hold on to that in your darkest times, you can slowly turn the tide from not liking yourself to liking yourself a little bit more. But it was the hardest lesson I ever learned, was how to like myself. And when you're going through this era of your brain growing and so many other things happening to you, it's a really big lesson to learn. So I never present myself as like, now I'm fine, or like, now I don't have mental health issues. I'm still learning. There's a lot to learn about your life through the whole course of it. What I don't like is when we tell young people that you have to have your mental health figured out, that you have to get all the sleep and not have stress and not have these other issues, because it's not true. You don't have to have your mental health figured out. You have to have skills that you can use when you need them. Much like a lot of people don't have their physical health always figured out, but they know what they should be eating. They know what they shouldn't be drinking. They know what they should be doing. It's the same thing with mental health. To take that pressure off yourself that you have to be perfect, but to just be getting better slowly every single day. And in order to do that, the most important thing you have to build are coping mechanisms. So if you think about any action that human beings are good at, they practice that thing. I had the unbelievable chance a few months ago to be on a basketball court with Steph Curry from the Golden State Warriors as he was warming up for like an hour. And in an hour's time, Steph Curry didn't miss a shot. He didn't miss a single shot. Not when he was at half court, not when he was in the stands, anywhere. Because he has practiced that sport so much that when he shoots and isn't thinking about it, he's making it. Every athlete does that. You think about your favorite athlete, they've practiced so much that they no longer think about that action. Do any of you play sports? Okay, what sports do you play? Who's good at football in this audience? Anybody? So we're pointing to this guy in the back. Okay, how long have you played football, sir? It's you in the hoodie. Buena. How long have you played football? Since you were how old? 3. 8. Okay. And how long did it take you to get really good? What do you say? You're average. Okay. So you're still learning. But how long did it take you to learn skills? Like 2 years? 3 years?
Probably
5 to 6 years. Okay. So 5 to 6 years of practice. All right. Does anyone in this audience play a musical instrument or play music? Okay. Where is this person? Kyle. What is he? What? Who wants to speak for him? All right. You don't want to talk. All right. Anybody else play an instrument or play music? He's the only one. All right. Does anybody in this audience dance? Who's good at dancing? And I'm not talking about TikTok dancing. That's fake. Who is good at dancing? All right. It's right here. Hey, not you. Hey, yes, say it. Hey. How long have you been dancing?
6 years.
6 years? How long did it take you to get to a point where you didn't have to think about what you were doing? You can just dance.
2 years.
2 years. Okay. Is anyone in this audience good at video games? Who is the best? You're the best. All right. What is your best game?
My best game.
Hey.
See, I play a lot of games. I would say
Choose one, Mona.
say Call of Duty. Say.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how long did it take you to get good at Call of Duty?
To get like really good
Hey.
took me about 4 years.
4 years. Okay.
Yes.
That's honest. Yeah. I am so bad at Call of Duty that when I play with my nephews, they won't even shoot me. They'll just stab me and laugh. And I'm like, what? Why did you do that? So here's the deal. When you are playing a sport, when you're playing an instrument, when you're learning how to dance, when you're learning how to play video games, you are creating patterns in your brain. And the longer you do something, the better you get at it. And that is a beautiful thing. That's what makes humans so different. But it has a downside. I started drinking alcohol when I was 12. And I drank alcohol every time I had an emotional issue until I was 22. The longer that I drank alcohol, the better I got at it. The more automatic that drinking alcohol became, the harder it was to change it. So if you think about video games or sports or music or dancing, the more you do it, it's just automatic. And then if you want to change it or stop, it's hard because you've been doing it for so long. So it's really important for you to think about how you cope. If a lot of you just shut down and you don't talk about your feelings, then you're going to get really good at that. And as you go through the rest of your life, that's what you're going to be good at. And the longer you do it, the harder it is to change it. So if you take a minute now and just think about how you cope. Do you shut down? Do you cry? Do you talk to people? Do you exercise? Do you write? What do you do? And think about how long you've been doing it. Because if it is something that is harmful to you, that's what is going to be most natural. That's what you're going to know how to do the best. I'm going to tell you one more part of my personal story, and then we can open up to questions about anything, about Los Angeles, about mental health, whatever you want to ask me about, because I'm here. When I turned 21 years old, my parents took me out for a birthday dinner, pretty standard birthday dinner. We went to a restaurant. We ordered some food. The waiter walked away, and then both of my parents started crying. My parents never cried. I'd never seen my dad cry before that night. My mom still never cries. And I remember looking at my parents and I was like, hey, why are you guys crying? Like, it's my birthday. And I remember my dad looking back at me through these like choked up, like bawling, like deep breaths. And he said, we didn't think that you would live to be 21 years old. I gave my parents a lot of reasons to not think that I would live to be 21. I did. I can't tell you how many hands I've held, how many people I've hugged, how many tears I've seen from humans all around the world who have lost someone they loved before the age of 21 to mental health. I lost my cousin 3 years ago. He was 22 to an opiate overdose. The reason I share this with you is because all of you sitting here today, you only have one life. You only have one chance, and this is it. And you spend most of your days going through a checklist of things you have to do. A checklist of things that you have to do in school, outside of school. And at the end of your day, you go to your own place of comfort, your own place of peace. For some of you, that place of comfort is your room. For some of you, that place of comfort is a phone, it's a person, it's something. The next time you're in your place of comfort, I want you to think about your internal life and how you can express it more. Because it takes more strength to talk about these issues than it does to hide them. It takes more strength to uncover these issues than it does to bury them. One of the most beautiful things about the history and tradition of Botswana is that your families, your ancestors, the people who found this country, the people who lived here long before it even had to be named, told their stories. They sat around the fire and they told their stories. Those stories are what have carried your great-grandparents, your grandparents, and your parents. Your story is powerful. Your story is what makes up your entire life. When you feel alone, when you feel lost, when you don't know what's happening, find a way to share that story. Find a way to share that story, to connect to the past of this nation, to the past of this land, to the past of human history. When I stood up in high school and shared my story when I was 17, I could have never imagined it would lead to me speaking to millions of people, to writing books, to starting a school, to changing the education system in America to focus on mental health. From this whole presentation is that at some point in your life when you really need to, you find the strength to share your story. Because much like me, you have no idea where your story can take you until you tell someone. Kele bohile. All right, thank you very much. We're going to open it up to questions. Like I said, you can ask questions about anything. Questions about mental health are preferred, but I get that you don't get to meet people from Los Angeles every day. So,
So what's with you? Let's say you have a lot of friends, right? And you don't trust any one of them with like your feelings. And you don't really know anyone who you can talk to about your feelings. So what do we do about that?
So there's a couple things you can do. One, maybe there's like a teacher or a family member you trust. Again, it might not be your parents. Maybe it's an uncle, maybe it's an aunt, maybe there's someone at school that you can ask like, hey, is it okay if I share this with you? The other thing is now there are like a lot of online communities where teens can share their emotions. And if you don't know any of those resources, you can even Google like, where are other teens talking about feelings? And then it can even be anonymous where you can share and get it out and find a way to just put a voice to it. It's scary in the beginning to find a person to talk to because like you start talking about your feelings and you feel like this like nervousness build up and then you start crying and then you're like, I don't want to talk about it. But finding that starting point is really important. So if it's not your friends, it could be a family member. It could be asking a teacher like, hey, what do I do? Or it could be finding some kind of online community where you're allowed to share. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. Next question. Any questions? Yeah, Era.
What is Los Angeles like?
In what way? Like the weather? Like what?
Just generally.
Hey, Los Angeles is very big. So like Botswana has about 2 million people. Los Angeles has about 10 million people. And it's probably the size of like, hey, from Gabs to like Lobate maybe. Yeah, so there's a lot of people, but we have the beaches, so you have the ocean, you can swim and surf. Then there's like mountains, so you can hike, or in the winter you can ski or snowboard. And then there's all kinds of people there, so it's very diverse. There's really different kinds of food. Hahona maguinya, but it's okay. There's other kinds of food. And then there's like the big thing about LA is there's always celebrities around, right? So like rappers, actors, people like that. So there's always big events happening. The Lakers have games there. There's football. There's American football, and then football. There's all kinds of different things happening. Concerts. So it's a big place. It's different from Mochuri. Slightly different. Any other questions? Yeah, go ahead. Just ask it. I'll hear. Keutwa.
I think the people like you are living with, they can't see how you feel. It might be like you end up looking at yourself in your bedroom like for a long time. So I feel.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm a little heartbroken.
Okay. Yeah. So, like I shared in my story, no one really knew how I was feeling. I was either crying myself to sleep at night or not sleeping at all, but I was alone in my room. Everyone outside only saw me like walking around feeling like everything was okay. If you're in a place where you feel heartbroken, or you feel sad, it's important to get that out in some way, whether it's like just writing it down. Some people will like, write a poem or write a rap song or do something just to get it out. Other people will like do something to kind of help cope. So it could be talking to someone, it could be exercising, it could be just doing something different. Hearts will stay broken inside of us until we find a way to release it in some way. Even if it's just crying all the time. Like crying can release some emotion. But it is better to tell someone what's happening, even like I was sharing before, if it's like online or doing something to get that emotion out. The longer that your heart stays broken, the longer that you keep that inside, the more it's going to build to you like exploding. And that's what happened to me, is that I kept it inside for so long that eventually I just broke. So if you're already feeling that way, try and find some way to get it out. And if your family doesn't know what's going on, but you know they care about you, you can try and start by talking to someone and let them know, like a lot of times people will be like, I don't believe you, right? But I think it's important to tell people when they say that, like, I'm not making this up. I don't gain anything. I don't benefit by making this up. Like there's nothing about me saying my heart is broken or I feel sad that would make someone feel like, oh, look at them lying to be better. So trying to find people who believe you is important.
Just to chip in for a minute.
Okay.
Most of you keep saying you don't know who you can talk to and you don't trust anybody close to you. I don't know if you've ever gotten your vaccinations by this clinic, just here by Bosija, AO Clinic, the private clinic. It actually has an emotional mental counseling facility. And for teenagers and for children, it's actually free, as well as with the government hospital, Deborah Chief Hospital. They've got counseling sessions which you can go to sign up for. You talk to somebody, even if just the local clinics. I think it's on Thursdays. They assign a therapist, and you can still go there. It's all free if you need. If you don't want to talk to anybody who you feel like knows you too well. Thank you.
That's good to know. Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Emma.
Okay, so started you said you said
The mic died.
hello.
Okay.
What are you doing? What are you doing? Hello.
Okay, so you said you used to like keep your emotions to yourself, but then you'd want to listen to other people and make them happy, laugh about stuff. Do you think that can be a coping mechanism, and what's wrong with doing that? Like, because I tend to suppress my emotions, but I'll rather listen to somebody else and advise them and help cheer them up instead of.
Yeah, I think it's like when anything goes to be too much. So I think it's always good to make people laugh or like make people feel happy. It's just that I was doing that in spite of myself. So I was doing it and then never sharing how I felt. And then it just reached to a point where like I broke. So I think if you can balance it, it's okay. But if you're just doing one thing and you don't find a way to like express yourself, then it can get bad.
So what should you do before you get to your like breaking point?
So that's where you would find a way to like stop that pattern of making sure everyone else is okay and taking care of yourself. Like finding a way to talk about it, express it, that the coping mechanisms I was talking about, like whatever you do, write, dance, whatever it is, get those emotions out in some way so that you're balancing it. Emma. Any
Hello?
other questions? Over here. Oh, there too.
Mr. What?
Tasha, che colpa mezzo?
What? Of the like certain things that maybe trigger maybe these certain breakdowns, like in your own like, how do you advise dealing with these triggers?
Yeah, I think some of the biggest triggers are rejection, like loss and change. So a lot of you, when you were younger, you probably faced some kind of rejection, like someone didn't like you, someone said something mean to you, someone treated you some kind of way, and that rejection was hard for you to deal with. The other thing that can trigger it is loss. So like losing a friend, losing a family member, losing someone you love, losing like a crush or a boyfriend, girlfriend, something like that can also trigger these things. And then another big thing that triggers it is change. So most of your teenage years are filled with change. Your body changes, you change different things in school, you change different things you like, you change different friend groups. These are usually the big. How all of you deal with it is also different. All of you sitting here today have a lot more in common than you have different. But what you'll focus on in school the most is what's different. Who does this? Who says this? Who looks like this? Who tries this? Who has matla? Who has power over someone else? Why do they have that power? How do they use that power? So all of those triggers are big things, and it goes back again to how you cope with it. Do you talk about it? Do you write about it? Do you play games? Do you do something to get those emotions out? But the biggest triggers are definitely what you're going through now. And matla, the most.
Do you know Steph on a personal level, and is he as good as he is in terms of looks?
Do I know who?
Do you know Steph Curry?
I have only seen Steph on the court, and then during a basketball game, Steph fell into my lap and I caught him. But I can't like hakena mohala wa Steph. I don't have it. So I've only seen him that one time or two times. Era. Oh, no. Over. Thanks.
Okay, so let's say you grew up in a family where they don't really talk about feelings a lot, and you end up having this feeling of like you feel like talking about your feelings is actually a sign of weakness. So how do you get rid of that urge, because it's now part of your mentality and you're so used to not talking about your feelings?
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. Yeah. Yes. I grew up in a family where my parents never talked about feelings, and so none of my aunts, uncles, cousins, no one talked about feelings. So I grew up thinking like, hey, this isn't something we do. If you want to change it, you'd have to go to a place like they were talking about, like a counseling center, something like that, to try it, because it's likely no one in your family is going to understand it, because that's the way they grew up. I think the most important thing to understand is a lot of times we think people who don't talk about emotions are strong because they're not talking about it, but it actually takes as much or more strength to talk about it, because talking about it means you're naming it, working on it, and trying to change it. It just might not be something you can do in a family where no one else is doing it. I will say that after I got confident in being able to speak about my emotions, other people in my family really wanted to try it. They just didn't know how. So like my dad, who had just a terrible, terrible childhood, once I started talking about my emotions, he actually started addressing his emotions completely differently. And he was in his like 50s. And then he started like thinking about his childhood and being like, you know, there's things I could have done differently. And he like kind of latched onto it. My brothers did too. So sometimes it just takes one person in a family to find a way to do it, and then other people may want to try it. They may not. I spent most of my time away doing it without them before I was able to do it with them. There's another question over here and here. He's had his hand up for a long time. A very long time, at least about 5 minutes. At least.
Yes, I wanted to ask, do you think money can buy happiness?
Do I think money can buy happiness?
Yes, like if you have a lot of money, like do you think you can be happy? Can I still going to be sad?
I know a lot of people who have Maria Mansi, and they still have issues.
Like who?
a lot of people go Los Angeles. They can drive all the things you see on a rap video. They can drive Bentleys. They have private planes, everything. And they still have depression. They still have substance use issues. They still have a lot of things happening. So I think that if you have money, you can get things that may give you like short-term happiness, but the ultimate happiness is found inside of you. And if you can't find it inside of you, it doesn't matter what else you have. One of the strongest things you can have is self-acceptance. Because if you know who you are, then other people can't mess with that. But a lot of people buy nice things because they don't have that and they're trying to distract themselves from it. So if you are someone who has that power within inside of you and you buy things, it can work. But if you don't have it inside of you, you can see those people fall pretty quickly. I've seen it.
I don't have a question, but
Okay.
I want to tell them something.
Okay.
I want to tell you guys something. You know, I think dealing with losing your loved one, how to deal with it is accepting it, because you cannot focus on something you cannot control. You can only accept the situation and stop hurting, because if you don't accept the situation the way it is, you are going to hurt even more and it's going to damage you and break you down. So you need to learn to live with it and cope. That's the only way you can deal with losing someone.
Thank you for that.
Um,
Emma.
I wanted to ask Cora, how do you think you could deal with attempted suicide?
How do I think you can deal with it?
Yes. Or how did you deal with it?
Oh, how did I deal with it? I had to go to the hospital for like 2 weeks because a lot of times people go to the hospital because they're in a place where like they just need something to stop them for a short amount of time until they can go back out into the world. I think the hardest thing about attempting to take your own life is like after it, I didn't magically just want to live, and learning how to like myself or learning how to live again took a long time. Other people, when they attempt suicide, might just need like some kind of other program where like somebody checks in with them daily or make sure that they're okay. But typically anyone who attempts, that's like a big step where now you need someone to check in with you every day until you feel like you don't need that anymore. Attempting is usually like the last sign that like you need help. People have thoughts about sadness or death or things like that in the beginning, but once it gets to that point of attempting, you need someone checking in on you, whether it's in a hospital or not. There's more questions everywhere. Honwele honwe.
So my question is related to the same question that you was asking about. Can money buy problems? So now I was just saying.
Oh, now it's problems. He
What
said
did
happiness.
He say? Happiness. Yes. Oh, so I wanted to say, do you think you can prescribe sort of a lifestyle, or let's say to this age? Because you said acceptance is the solution, right?
Part of it,
Yes, part of it. But still, I cannot just accept my problem, then I sit. So do you have sort of a lifestyle? Because some people say you go to church, right? You can still do that, but still you find out that maybe you are still having that. So do you have sort of a lifestyle that you can say?
Yeah, I think again, it comes back to like looking at mental health like physical health. If you eat bad food and you don't exercise and you don't take care of yourself, then your physical health is going to suffer. With your mental health, it's the same thing. If you just sit back and you don't try to find coping mechanisms, you don't try to find a connection to something bigger than yourself, you don't put action into addressing your problems, then your mental health is going to struggle and suffer as well. So the lifestyle choice is really thinking like, okay, I know how to do these things for physical health. I have to do these things for my mental health. But that's going to be different for everybody. Some people might like being outside. Some people might like going to church. Some people might like, listening to music, doing something else. The main goal is that you're being proactive about it, no matter what it is that you're doing. Having a connection to something bigger than you typically is a big help. And that could be church, but it could also be family. It could be volunteering. It could be something that gives back. I think one of the most beautiful things about Botswana's history is that your ancestors believed so much in family and in cherishing the land. And the rise of technology and all these other things, we have not around the world been doing things that just give back to us, just being outside, just doing things that help us feel connected. We've been relying on phones to feel connected, and we feel more disconnected every day. So I can't prescribe just one lifestyle because everyone is different. But if you compare mental health to physical health and you do things to take care of yourself, it can be part of the answer to that.
Thank you.
They're gonna go back and then come up. Oh no.
How
Did I say that out loud? I meant to say that in my internal voice. But go ahead.
how do you know you're depressed, or rather, how do you differentiate sadness and depression?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So like there are certain things that you can think about and they kind of go away. So like let's say you think like, oh, I'm very lonely today, but then like you go to school, you don't feel lonely as much anymore, and then like you don't think about it for a couple of days. But let's say like you feel lonely all the time. You feel lonely when you're with everyone. You feel lonely when you're alone. Then like that's a bigger sign. So the difference between feeling sad is that the opposite of being sad is being happy. When you have depression, the opposite of having depression is just having energy to even get out of bed and do the things you enjoy. So if you ever feel sad and then you feel happy, you can see like, oh, that's a difference. But when you have depression, the opposite of that isn't being happy. It's being able to like do the things you normally did in the world before that depression. Does that make sense? Okay.
Have you ever met
Emma?
Have you met any other famous basketball player?
I have, but I can't list all of them. So
You can.
I got being in Los Angeles, I've met LeBron a couple of times, and Russell Westbrook and Dwight Howard, a lot of the Lakers. I got it. Right here.
Yeah, so I agree. You said you used to like alcohol, I get. So how like if you feel like alcohol takes care, yeah. Take care is English is a problem. Take care.
Took care. So it's about me.
Took care of your problems. Then or not just alcohol, maybe like maybe smoking or drug abuse, like how would you deal with
Yeah. So the problem a lot of times with drugs and alcohol is it never takes care of the problem. It just makes you feel better in the moment. So like when I got drunk or when I got high, I felt like I didn't have these problems anymore, right? But when the drunk or the high wore off, the problems were bigger. So it's like a temporary like high, but it actually can make it a lot worse. And then if you become addicted to alcohol or drugs, then it makes the problem like twice as bad because now not only do you have the original emotions, but now you have the drugs and alcohol you have to deal with. So it's a fake fix. It feels good in the moment, but it makes it worse. So I had to learn a way to actually like address my emotions without alcohol. And then like I was sober for 2.5 years because I didn't know how to do it without the alcohol. And then like now occasionally like I drink socially, but I have to be careful because I used alcohol for so long.
Then you also said with church, I get it. You said church can help. Not I don't like church.
So like it can help some people. And that's what I was saying. That's why I said like church volunteering, like hey, doing something bigger than you is the thing. So it's not just like church, it's feeling something bigger than yourself. The issue when you're going through depression is if you don't do something bigger than you, then your depression becomes even more consuming because that's all you see. So doing something bigger than you can help. Era.
So say things like anxiety pills and depression pills.
Eh.
How do those work? How do those help? Because isn't that the same thing as taking drugs? Because they solve your problem temporarily.
Not necessarily. So like if you think about drugs, a lot of drugs are addictive. And the addictive nature of the drugs, while it can spike different neurotransmitters in your brain, it's only a short amount of time and it actually fuels the addiction to the drugs. Anxiety pills and depression pills are meant to lift your mood or help you stabilize your mood for a certain amount of time. But anyone who takes anxiety or depression pills should also be doing things in their life outside of those things. I get it. It's like if you know someone who has diabetes and they take insulin, that's good. But if they then just eat fried chicken and like chips and they drink beer and they do all these other things, like they eat sweets and cake and ice cream and all these things, that's not going to help them deal with their diabetes. So when you take anxiety or depression pills, you also have to like talk about how you feel, find coping mechanisms, find ways to release your emotions, or you're not going to be doing it the best way. But anxiety and depression pills aren't the same thing as other alcohol and drugs because they help stabilize emotions versus like giving you a high and then disappearing. They don't give you a high. Okay. And then there's a question back there in the orange cap and then over there. Oh, no, you're good? Hahona Potso?
Are you a professor at UCLA or like?
Yes. So in both 2016, UCLA was starting a school for students in grades 11 to 18. And I was speaking around the country and they asked me what would I do if I got to start my own school. And so I said if I got to start my own school, I would have a class for students where they have to learn about their mental health once a week, every single week, from age 11 to age 18. So then they hired me to start the school. So it was me and like 4 other people started this school for students that are age 11 to 18. So I teach at that school every day, and then I run a company on the side. But what we're doing at UCLA now is we started a mental health teacher training institute where we teach other schools how to do what we're doing at our school to change the education system so that students learn about mental health the same way they learn about physical health. So I never got my doctorate. I have a master's degree, but I did start this school at UCLA's campus. We're right on UCLA's campus. So it's called Geffen Academy at UCLA. Geffen Academy at UCLA. That's Geffen. Oh, there's another question. This mic.
Hello.
Hake utwe.
Hello. She says, at what point in life do you realize that I need help?
So I think you can realize that at any age. I think that like babies and small children ask for help a lot. For me, it was late, and it wasn't until really I was 22 that I was like, oh, I actually need a lot of help. Everything before that wasn't effective, but I think that people can realize they need help now. I think that what you saw today, where a lot of students thinking like, I'm at this point where I need help, and you could see it talked about in these questions or in these realizations. Typically, from a research perspective, the average amount of time between a person experiencing an issue and accessing help is 7 to 10 years. Typically, people wait 7 to 10 years to ask for help. The purpose of like having conversations like this or doing things to help you do it sooner so that you're not waiting 7 to 10 years. Again, the adults here know people who have waited much longer than 10 years. They've waited way too long. And when you wait that long, now you have to deal with all of those years you didn't seek help. So the sooner you do it, the better it is.
Hello?
Eh.
Okay. So, as was mentioned before, that people may have like big issues that they feel or see that they can't really overcome. And then also I've noticed that a lot of people, once they get to varsity, like they literally go off. Like they just it's not okay. But then again, how do you then try to basically try to take care of yourself mentally without being triggered in the sense that like a lot of things that are causing you hurt and pain are things that surround you daily.
Yeah.
Like so they're like your norm basically. So then how do you try to get out of that? Like get out of your head, but then physically the things that trigger you are there.
Yeah, so in that situation where you're surrounded by triggers every single day, it's going to be like impossible to not have those triggers. What you have to try and do in those situations is create a space where you just have less triggers, whether that's your own space or a space outside your home or somewhere else where like all of those triggers aren't as strong. A lot of people grow up in homes where their mental health is triggered constantly by fighting, by neglect, by abuse, by other things like that. And in those situations, it's really difficult to say like, oh, you just won't have any more triggers. It's trying to get to a place where you have a safe space where you can be triggered less and then working on those triggers not affecting you as much. When you're a teenager and you have no like outside escape, that's hard to do. And during the pandemic, a lot of teenagers were really harmed because they were in these environments that they couldn't get out of. As you get older, like there's ways to think like, okay, maybe at age 18, I can go somewhere, do something else, and then work towards that point of like, how can I get here so I am not around these triggers anymore or around this like toxicity anymore? But it takes a lot of steps and time. In a situation like you're describing, it would be good to talk to someone at the counseling center where they're doing the injections or things like that, because it's a lot more guidance than just like a quick answer from a question. But throughout life, you're always going to be triggered. It's what work can you do to maybe feel those triggers less, but it takes time to get there. But that's a really good question. Any other questions? In the very back. What time is it? 3:24. Okay. Oh, right, because you end at 3:30, right? Yeah.
Why do some kids in America turn into school shooters with mental health issues?
So
like why do they take that extent?
Yeah, the easiest answer is that they have access to guns. So like in America, the laws are they're problematic because you can be 18 and buy an AR-15. You can buy like a big gun at age 18. In other countries around the world, the reason a lot of school shootings don't happen is because people just don't have access to those guns. As I've traveled around the world, the same kind of like isolation, disappointment, loneliness exists in people of all ages. But in most countries, they don't have access to just like being 18. And in some states, you can buy a gun within 5 minutes. Like you can just walk in and walk out with a gun. If that kid doesn't have access to that gun, he can't go back and then shoot up a school. The mental health issue component of it is, if you think about it, like 20% of teenagers in America have a mental health disorder, but 20% of teenagers around the world have a mental health disorder. School shootings only happen mainly in America. It's because there's so many guns. And if they were able to, which they're just, I've come to understand they're never going to do it. They're never going to take away the guns. And so, unfortunately, in America, like my students in my school, they live in fear of someone coming in and shooting them pretty much every day. And there's nothing that I can do to like take that away because they see it on the news all the time. So the real answer is like people have mental health issues, but not everyone has access to a gun.
Is it possible that after maybe having gone through that mechanism of coping with your mental issues, you have a relapse?
Yeah, I've had many relapses in my life. So like I tried to take my own life when I was 17. I had a relapse at 18, 19. I was in the hospital all 3 of those times. And then even like Kemona Maholo, even as an old man, I am still go through times where I have to really take care of my mental health and make sure that I'm trying to balance it. It's just like physical health. So like you might have a leg injury and go through therapy and be able to walk again. And then some years later, your knee goes out again, or your shoulder goes out, or your leg goes out. Like, and then you have to work on it again to strengthen your body. It's the same thing with the mind. There's different times where you have to strengthen it. And everyone has gone through different kinds of loss or change. So like you can go through depression and think you're okay, and then like someone dies, or you go through a breakup or something else, and it's a moment where you have to work on your mental health even more.
Is overthinking a problem? Like, is it one of the mental problems, or it's just something, or it's just the way a person's mind is programmed to work?
Hotata, overthinking means like you're thinking so fast it's hard to slow it down. And when your brain is thinking that fast, it might mean you're not sleeping, or it might mean you can't even be in a situation because you're just thinking so much. And then you're talking so fast and like nothing's making sense. In those situations where your brain is thinking so much, it's really important to find ways to like get that energy out. Whether it's writing, talking, exercise, something, because the brain acts on like this loop, and the more you think, the more it might keep thinking. And then you just kind of like make it go too fast. So even at this age, if you can find ways to slow it down, it's important. Okay. Reheditse. No. One more question. Oh no, we're done.
No. All right, guys, can we please give Mr. Ross a wonderful round of applause? I honestly, I want to say, guys, I am completely proud of your questions. They were so thoughtful. They're engaging. Thank you guys for obviously having Ross here, talk to him, telling a story. Sometimes these topics are a little bit hard to hear about, to talk about, or to think about. But it's always it's important for you guys to know that there are stories like this all over the world. And if it is your story, to talk about it, to share, to listen, to treat yourself and others with kindness. We had some questions about how do I get help, or what if I'm in this situation, where do I go? We did have some great resources that you guys heard about. We will also be sending communication to you guys, your parents, about a resource as well that is at no cost to you, You guys will be able to talk to somebody. We'll figure out whether they come here or you can go to them in Rasasa, but we want to make sure you guys have a resource that you can go to as well to make sure that even if you just need to go talk about your annoying older sister, you have somebody as my annoying older sister looks at me, that you can go talk and feel safe and feel heard and feel validated. But I do want to say thank you guys. Thank you again, Ross. We appreciate you coming all this way just for us. One more thing I do want to say is you may not know this, but today, the very lovely dressed man in maroon, as you all know, is Mr. Ade, is his birthday today. So why don't we all wish Mr. Ade a birthday? But also, I want to take a picture, commemorate this wonderful day. I don't know how I'm going to do this. I don't take selfies often. It's not my thing. I'm a little old for that. But I do want to take a what I am. It's fine. You must acknowledge these things, accept them. But I do want to take a picture of all you guys and Ross.
Are you going to be in it?
No, I'm not going to be in it.
Well, then it's not a selfie.
Oh, you see, this is why I'm not good at these things. All right, guys. So stand up, be happy, proud. You guys all dressed up lovely. Let's take a picture for the gram.